question, and traditionally the answer was they don't. I think we've seen over the last 10 years a very clear coming together of the two agendas. In particular, the idea of could Africa springboard to the next stage? Could technologies, as has been the case in telecommunications, be applied in the green tech space and allow us to move away from fossil fuels and into a new kind of economy, new jobs and new growth? And so this idea of green growth is actually a kind of combination of both the growth agenda and the environmental agenda into a green trajectory for change.
I mean, post-Copenhagen, obviously, a lot of emphasis has been placed on looking at where Africa fits within the environmental context. Because Africa is said to be the most susceptible to climate change, we're told we should be doing both things, mitigating strategies and adapting to the changing environment. Is Africa doing enough?
I think that the challenge is anybody doing enough? And if we look to China as a great example, probably 20% or thereabouts of the total investment now in renewables and clean energy in the world is going on in China. That's one grand plan, if you like, every 5 years within China. The conversation could be made that if China was a number of different countries like Africa is, would it be in the same place? So there might be an issue about regional integration to create that kind of wholesale change and drive forward that the continent needs.
Right.
That aside, if we actually start to look at the investment and the action that's happening in Africa, I think here in South Africa and in other countries too, Tanzania, Kenya, and to an extent Nigeria, there are some very, very interesting developments in place.
I mean, obviously a lot of concerns at the moment because most African countries are net exporters and producers of agricultural products, and the issue is how climate change and the environment is going to impact on this bedrock of African economies.
It's going to be hard. There undoubtedly will be environmental impacts on agriculture as a result of climate change. To what scale and when, nobody can say for absolute certainty. But it's clear that issues like water scarcity, heat stress will affect the sector. Now, the challenge about that is to actually create a resilient economy to adapting conditions, whether they be economic fluctuations in commodity prices, whether they be climatic fluctuations in temperature. So how does one create resilience in an economy? And these bedrocks include policy, include pricing, and include technology.
Right. Water is gaining a lot of preeminence, and it seems within the whole environmental agenda, this is the one thing that policymakers are honing in on. Why?
I think it's a great question again. I think there's two things about water which allow a policymaker perhaps to get to grips with the challenge. Number one, it's inherently local. By that I mean national or regional or within the water basin. Climate change is such a big topic.
Yeah.
So it's inherently local. Number two, the governance of water, the custodian of the governance of water is the government.
Yeah.
So again, you have a frame to the challenge. That in itself, I think, provides the political equation to then try and do something about it.
Right.
Historically, a very, very difficult and fractious issue, but with the new blending of the public and private interface together with civil society, we're starting to see some movement in this space at a national level, which is a little bit different to that which we've seen in climate change.
Give us a sense of how severe the situation is. We're told that in South Africa we've almost exhausted our water capacity. We're utilizing about 96% of our total water capacity, and we need to be finding new water sources. We need to be building new dams. What's the outlook like in other African countries?
Well, let's take South Africa as an indicator of the challenge, because there's a growth agenda, obviously, in South Africa. So the issue is not about using less, it's about using more smartly. How do we deliver the resources that we need to meet the growth aspirations? Now, the growth plan for South Africa, if kind of delivered under business as usual, would create a 52% increase in demand on today for fresh water in the country. That's about a 17% gap between what will be required and what is safely available. So the challenge is not that there is no water. The challenge, like energy efficiency in other quarters, is how do we use what we have a lot more smartly? That in itself opens up a wealth of innovation and entrepreneurialism, new technologies, new business opportunities to close the gap between supply and demand, and actually even reduce it and allow water back into the ecosystem. And I think it's no coincidence that we're starting to see a lot of blue tech ventures in the water space, like we've seen green tech ventures in the low carbon space.
Talking about innovation, and finally, another key issue is going to be the Green Fund. We've seen them assemble a committee for the Green Fund and trying to allocate resources to new technologies and renewable technologies, especially in poorer nations. A question that Trevor Manuel, who's a committee member, has raised is, how do you price pollution? Who should be paying for it? In Africa, the argument is we've just begun our industrial process. Why should we be hamstrung by some of these environmental concerns?
Again, perhaps if one looks at this in the context of growth, one can set out the stall of what a kind of lean, green, smart economy would look like. If one wants to rely wholly on fossil fuels, then one is going to be taking account of price fluctuations, energy and security issues and the like. If one wants to create a blend, which may be a smart, resilient way to build out an economy, that blend is going to take account of some renewables and other forms of energy. Within that context, that's not a question about pricing pollution, it's a question of building a resilient economy. One easy area to look at in theory, although inherently difficult to do in practice, which is a global issue, is the issue of subsidies, fossil fuel subsidies. Close to $600 billion a year annually on fossil fuel subsidies. Current global market for clean energy private investment about $250 billion a year. Therein lies the difference. That's not a pricing issue for pollution, that's a rebalancing of the market to create that innovation and change that we want.